Big Juggernaut Joyce versus the Big Bang Zhilei Zhang this Saturday at the Copper Box Arena in London. This one, I feel like it's kind of gone under the radar and snuck up on me. It was only yesterday I realised that it's fight week and bring it on. I'm sure you guys know I'm looking forward to this one. Even though there's nothing really on the line, WBO interim belt, whatever. I think this is a neat scrap, and I think it's going to be fireworks for as long as it lasts. I like the styles of both guys, particularly Joyce. Joyce is a fighter I've always enjoyed watching right from the beginning. And Zhang, I feel like I'm in the same boat as a lot of people who have been won over since his last fight against Filip Hrgovic. Because Zhang, he was a fighter I always knew about, knew who he was, but I never really I never really saw much incentive to watch him. I didn't think he was going to be anything special, but in that fight against Hrgovic, he impressed me with some of his ability. Some people thought that he beat Hrgovic. No, I don't think he did. I thought Hrgovic won 7 rounds to 5. However, it was a close fight, definitely. 100% was a close fight. And yeah, Zhang showed that he had some ability and some strings to his bow. And at a bare minimum, he showed that he has heart. Because from round 7 of that fight, he was dog tired. He was breathing out of his backside. But he kept trying. And sometimes that's just enough to win people over. But yeah, I was impressed with the ability of Zhang, particularly in the first half of that fight. And I'm actually going to use that Hrgovic fight as kind of my basis for this prediction because Hrgovic is of similar dimensions to Joyce, and not that they're stylistically similar, but I feel like they perform some of the similar movements to each other in fights, which could be an indicator of how Zhang will have to go about this fight with Joyce. But interestingly, Joyce, from what I can see and what I remember, hasn't actually fought any southpaws as a professional. So this will be an interesting challenge for him. Because Zhang is an experienced southpaw. He had quite a decent amateur background, and he is you can tell that he knows his way around the ring. He's got plenty of experience. I don't want to say that he's like the slipperiest southpaw because he's not, but he's a handful. Let's say that. He's quite consistent with the lead hand, which is common with southpaws. You can see that in the fight against Hrgovic, which, as I say, is kind of going to be my reference for this prediction. And yeah, very consistent with the lead hands, occupying the lead hand of the orthodox fighter in Hrgovic, and a lot of offense coming off of that. Um, Zhang he seems to have quite a particular skill set in terms of his refined skills. He, in the Hrgovic fight, did a really good job of countering Hrgovic's jab with both the right hook and the straight left. So if you look at Zhang, his posture, he's typically a bit more front foot heavy, where he's leaning towards the front half of his stance. And that's where he does a lot of his good countering. Because what he'll do is, if you jab at him, because he's occupying the lead hand, and if you jab at him from there, sometimes he will pull back to the back half of his stance and simultaneously throw that right hook. And he does that quite well. But that's only one option. He can also split the jab of an orthodox opponent, which is where if you jab towards him, he slips further towards his right leg, his lead leg, simultaneously throwing the straight left. And the way he does it is impressive. You can tell he's had a lot of practice, and it's kind of like his go-to. Those are his go-to counters, and he uses them well. And he's not the quickest guy, Zhang, like certainly not, but he does have some deceptive speed on his combinations. Like occasionally he'll back a fighter up, particularly Hrgovic, and he would just let rip, 3 or 4 punch combinations, and the speed on him was like, oh damn, like, it's quite surprising. And they're fairly accurate as well. Like in that Hrgovic fight, it wasn't unusual to see Hrgovic get pinged with 2, 3, 4 shots in a row that were knocking his head back. And you can say, okay, if Hrgovic is taking that many shots, Zhang probably isn't the biggest puncher. Yeah, that's a fair point. Although I think there were a few occasions where Hrgovic was buzzed in that fight, and I'd probably say that Hrgovic was hurt more than Zhang was hurt, even though that I still feel Hrgovic won that fight. There were some occasions where Zhang would land a counter on Hrgovic, and Hrgovic didn't look great. He looked like, he wasn't doing a chicken dance or anything, but he looked like he was shaken to his boots. And that's probably the deal with Zhang, even though he's not a massive puncher. He's just such a big guy, and he's got good technique and he's accurate, that you don't really want to get hit by him because it's not going to tickle. It will probably rattle your bones a bit just because he's so enormous. So yeah, he's not the quickest, but he's good time with both hands. He has some select countering strategies that he uses quite well, and I think that might be key for him to in this fight against Joyce, because one of Zhang's weaknesses is that it seems relatively easy to occupy his guard, because Hrgovic isn't the most fluid fighter. He's actually quite robotic, but he showed that with some lighter shots, you can get Zhang to shell up fairly easily. Um, if you throw one shot, like one single jab, even if you time it well, Zhang has a good eye, so he'd probably get off his own counters. However, if you kind of flood him with some lighter shots, lefts and rights, he will just shell up. He'll use the high guard. He may step back, but it's a limited defense. And I think what Hrgovic really capitalized on was because that where Zhang has that limited defense of either stepping back or using a high guard. Particularly when he used the high guard, his body was exposed, and so Hrgovic was just able to sink in a couple shots to that massive midsection of Zhang and really sap his energy. So I see Joe Joyce being able to do the same thing, because Joe Joyce, one thing he does really well is he mixes up his power. You can see it. He lands kind of these fairly innocuous lighter shots, but then all of a sudden he'll land a big, usually arcing or hooking shot around the guard or something. And that's the thing about Joyce is, firstly, he's got an engine, so he's just got work rate for days. But he understands how to vary his power, so he can just flood you with shots and wear you down that way. And Joe Joyce, he's quite dynamic when he gets moving. Once he has some momentum, he is actually like the Juggernaut from the X-Men. Is if you can keep him still, he's fine. Like you can control him. He can't do anything. But if you allow him to get moving, he becomes unstoppable. Because Joe Joyce has got footwork. Head movement is there. Maybe a little bit rough around the edges at times because you can still catch him. But he moves his hands, he moves his head, he moves his feet. And so once all those components get moving, he's very difficult to stop. And that's what I'm trying to say here is Zhang, his best bet is early on. He has to sting Joyce with some of those combinations. Not, I don't think that Zhang can knock Joyce out, but I think he can hurt him enough so that Joyce is a bit more careful. And I think that's what Zhang really has to do early on. He has to land those counters, especially countering the jab of Joyce, and get Joyce under manners a little bit. Because if Joyce gets into that full swing, sound like I'm from Germany, full swing, it's going to be a hard night for Zhang. And he'll probably make a big bang when he hits the canvas. Because Zhang, I don't think the stamina's there. And when the stamina tanks, the work rate drops as well. And he's just too open. And I don't think, Hrgovic spoke about how he underestimated Zhang and how he probably wasn't in the best fighting condition. That's not going to be the case with Joe Joyce. I think Joe Joyce sees Zhang as a threat, and we know Joyce has got the work rate anyway. And if he gets into his groove, I think it's going to be a hard night for Zhang. So, yeah, I think it's imperative that Zhang gets Joyce under manners early. That being said, I do think that Joyce, even if he gets caught early, he is an intelligent fighter. He's got a lot he can do. He feints quite well. He can fight in different ways. He can fight going backwards. He can fight going forwards. Whereas Zhang, I think his skill set is a little bit more situational. He needs a bit more time, a bit more space. But hey, maybe he can pull out a kind of Hail Mary shot if Joyce looks to press him too much and sends Joyce onto the seat of his pants. Who knows? But I do think that this is a Joyce win. Although I do see Zhang having some success early, landing some clean punches. But I just think Joyce has got too much at this point. And yeah, as I say, it should be fun while it lasts, but I'm expecting the Joyce win. Do I think he's going to go and stop Zhang? Or does this go to the scorecards? That's the hard part for me. I'm fairly confident that Joyce wins this. I'm just not sure how. I'm going to say that he probably stops Zhang. But a late stoppage. I'd be surprised if Zhang goes early. I think this is going to be maybe a round 10, round 11 stoppage for Joyce. I think it'll just get to a point where he's landing too consistently on Zhang, and Zhang probably still tries and does. I don't think Zhang's going to quit or anything like that, but I think maybe he'll force like a corner stoppage or something. Zhang probably gets hits too much and in his corner throw in the towel. Yeah, I think that's how it's going to go down. I'm going Joyce 10, stoppage in 10 or 11 rounds, something like that. But I think it's going to be a fun fight. I'm looking forward to this one. Undercard's not saying much, but hey, the main event's good enough for me. Let me know what you guys think. Are you looking forward to this fight? How do you think it goes down? What do you think of my assessment? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think I've left anything out? Leave it down below. I'll get back to you. But for now, thanks for listening. I'll catch you in the next one.